Good evening. I'm Andrew Sigel. Carrie Tilley and I are co-founders of the Bay Area Culinary Historians, and we want to welcome you to this evening's special presentation. We are honored tonight to host renowned chef, restaurateur, and award-winning author Joyce Goldstein. Joyce will be interviewed by founding BACH member Pam Elder, who was instrumental in making this evening possible. Joining Joyce is her son, Evan Goldstein, master sommelier, author, and recognized expert in the world of wine and viticulture. From her popular cooking school to her stint as the executive chef at Chez Panisse Café to ownership of her celebrated restaurant Square One and her award-winning cookbooks and other writings, Joyce has made invaluable contributions to our region's food culture as well as to culinary literature. I know we are all looking forward to hearing about her experiences and insights. We've received excellent questions sent in by attendees in advance and incorporated as many as possible. If you have additional questions and comments, please put them in the chat window, and if time allows, Pam will present them to Joyce. Finally, because this month is Joyce's celebrating her 90th birthday, this evening is both a recognition of her enduring achievements as well as an opportunity to wish her a very happy birthday. So please join us in welcoming Joyce and Evan Goldstein.
Thank you.
Hi, Joyce. We're just thrilled that you consented to let us celebrate your landmark birthday with all of us. First, I'd like to give you a little background as to how this event came about. Andrew Sigel and Carrie Tilley co-founded the Bay Area Culinary Historians after our fantastic Erica Peters moved on after 20 years of founding and leading the Culinary Historians of Northern California. I've been a member of both organizations since their beginnings, and I'm so pleased that Andrew and Carrie let me lead this event, as I've been one of your biggest fans since my late husband and I first enjoyed your cooking at Square One. And I began adding your books to my 60-year collection, of which this is just one room full. And you'll see that I have many of yours. They're all just wonderful books, your books.
Thank you.
They're comprised of fascinating cultural scholarship, thousands of outstanding recipes that are not just well written, but they're tested so that they're absolutely cookable as well as delicious. I wanted to do this because I think it's important for people, especially younger people, or those who are new to our area, to know you, your books, and your many accomplishments. You are truly a treasure. We have people signing in from all around the world, and it really is a fitting testimony to your reputation and your popularity. Everyone here today is thrilled to be with you today to celebrate with you. So now I'd like to start with your beginnings, if I may. Joyce, you were born July 17th, 1935, 90 years ago. You grew up in Brooklyn, and your parents, who were both working, weren't particularly into food, like many people at that time and for many years afterward. But your family went out to eat a couple times each week, and I understand it was a treat and an inspiration for you. How did that open up food discoveries for you?
Well, eating at home was very, very simple. My mother really didn't like to cook, but we went out to eat at very good restaurants. Peter Luger's for steak, Lundy's for lobster, just a number of good local restaurants. And I was excited to try them all.
Yeah, Joyce. So Joyce, for those of you who are perhaps fellow Brooklynites, is a Crown Heights girl
Yes.
over on President. What's her address on President Street?
1745 President Street.
I didn't know that until we started this conversation today. But growing up there, which is not far from Utica Avenue.
Utica Avenue.
Tell us a little bit about Utica Avenue and how much there's a lot going on there.
Well, Utica Avenue was sort of a retail street, delicatessens, appetizer stores, restaurants. It was a very active food and commerce street, and we could walk there.
Yeah. And you were mentioning amongst, a couple of classic Brooklyn spots. You mentioned Lundy's. You had a favorite waiter there too, didn't you?
I had one waiter all the time. His name was Waddy, and he watched me grow up and watched me eat. And the first time I finished an entire lobster, he applauded.
Ah, that's
Very sweet.
That's great. That's great. And I remember you were also telling me that when you would eat there, they didn't take reservations, right?
So you had to spot a table that was getting ready for dessert and then stand nearby. I used to tell this to my staff at Square One, that if you saw a table that was at the end and we needed a table, to send me out there and I'd stand there and give them the Lundy's look.
The Lundy's look, and that's how you got your table there. You also talked about Peter Luger's and the great steaks and a favorite salad of yours too.
They had a tomato and onion salad with sort of a funny French dressing, but it was very nice. And the tomatoes were always good.
Uh-huh.
I don't know what their sauce was,
Yeah.
but it was fun and you could get beautiful rare steak, well aged, and that salad, and that's about all you really needed.
Great. And then you talked to me. We don't think about it much out here and certainly anymore, but cafeterias were a big deal back then. And you mentioned one on Utica that you really liked.
No, it was on Eastern
Eastern Parkway.
near-
Okay.
It's called Dubrow's, and you could go in there, and the lineup of food was amazing. And one of my favorite things there was a sturgeon and raw onion sandwich, which was really good.
And when we were looking today and it closed, the last time somebody said it was still open in 2009, but not anymore.
Well, they were there for a long time.
Awesome.
I'm glad I got to go.
That's great. That's great. Pam?
Yeah, moving on. Later in life, you went to Smith College in Northwest Massachusetts for your bachelor's degree in art history. You took a Phi Beta Kappa degree. That was one of your first major accomplishments. And then you went on, you graduated in 1956 and went on to get a master's in fine arts at Yale in 1959. And there, you and your late husband had an apartment and you started to cook and you enjoyed it.
Well, I did enjoy it, and I cooked for a lot of students in our classes. So it was fun to have them over.
Yeah. You were saying it was that my late father and Joyce's then husband, Mark, actually built the apartment and built this little kitchen. Talk to us about that.
It was an apartment in a basement of a big building, and Mark built it. And the kitchen was up one step from the living room, and I had a sink, a little counter, a stove, and a little prep thing.
Uh-huh.
And I learned not to back up or I'd fall in the living room, but it was fun to cook there.
And what was the address of that in New Haven?
2 Dwight Street.
Yeah, which is very important because for those of you who remember her in her Berkeley era, we lived off Dwight Way for a while, so you did a Dwight Revisited kind of thing, Dwights and all that. So what was cooking? I know you talked to me earlier a little bit about it, and when you were learning about stuff like that, particularly when you were at Smith, where there was, dorm food was dorm. Yeah, but you said that you were befriended by a guy who used to buy art supplies from.
Yes, I used to get my art supplies from Lou Smith, and we became friends. And so I got a break from dorm food because Smitty and his wife would have me come for dinner, which was a blessing.
Was he inspirational at all? I mean, obviously you got to eat well, which was great. Did he inspire you from a food standpoint?
Just, bought all my art supplies from him. And over time, you start talking to people and become friends. And he was a great guy. And so I luckily got to eat there a few times.
Oh, nice. And I remember you were telling me when you were growing up that you essentially lived on PB&Js, huh, in the early days?
Well, I used to bring a sandwich to school.
Yeah, that was sort of an important thing. Anyway, great. That's a great story. Pam?
Yeah, and while you were at Yale, you were studying painting under the Bauhaus color theorist Joseph Albers, and possibly because I guess your late husband was studying architecture, you happened to meet Louis Kahn somewhere, and you invited him to dinner, and he came up
Many times.
And I'm just wondering, were you already that secure in your skills, or
I
were
didn't
you
think about it.
brave? Were you
I
brave?
didn't think about it. I
Yeah.
knew that having a home cooked meal would be very nice. Eating out in New Haven in those days was not a big thing. And so if you invited someone over for dinner, they really appreciated it.
Uh-huh. Good.
I think what was really interesting, we were chatting earlier, and Joyce was saying that, I know from my own experiences in life that it's very easy to get intimidated when famous people show up in your life at one time or another. And these two people that you mentioned, Louis Kahn in architecture and Joseph Albers in art, were icons. Our icons certainly today, but even at the time they were. Many people would do that. And Mom, you just said you just like people, right? And if you'd like people, you'd have them over.
If I liked them, I invited them for dinner, also because I knew dining out, their options were not great. And I became pretty close with Lou Kahn. He was known as Lou Dear, and
Uh-huh.
he would come for dinner whenever he was there teaching. It was very nice. And I cooked for a lot of students in school too.
So this obviously probably helped, as you were growing everything too, but this whole idea of cooking as love and cooking as a gift and cooking for people and bringing people together in sociality, something that I think we're sorely missing in this day and age so much, was something that was very natural for you.
If I liked somebody, I invited them over.
That's great. That's great. And you did this pretty frequently?
Oh, yeah, because you see, most of the students didn't cook.
Mhm.
And so if you were friends with people, come on over for dinner, you know,
Right.
and they did quite cheerfully.
Uh-huh. That's great. That's great. And back then, I mean, this is long before your cooking school era and long before that. What kinds of food were you cooking? Do you remember what you were cooking back then? Was it very simple food? Were you ambitious at all?
I think it was relatively simple because I was just teaching myself,
Mhm.
and I had to walk all the way down Main Street of New Haven to get to the Growers Outlet Market and then schlep the market stuff back. And I had the joy of cooking, you know, your basic books, and I would make a dinner, and if it was a hit, I'd do it again.
Uh-huh.
And I mean, you don't hit every time, but it was a learning experience, and people that came appreciated being invited over for
Right.
dinner.
And clearly you were good at it, right?
I guess I was.
Yeah, and you weren't intimidated at the time. I mean, you were very young. The idea of picking up any book and just sort of reading through it and deciding, yeah, I'm going to do that, and you've got a lot of people coming over. No,
I
wasn't hard for
really
you.
impressed because I knew what the food was supposed to taste like,
Hmm.
and I could get good ingredients. So I did it, you know, I didn't think about it. It wasn't food as theater in those days. You were just inviting people over
Yeah,
for a meal.
yeah. How awesome.
Yeah.
Pam?
Well, yeah, you described your painting teacher, Joseph Albers, as someone uh, sometimes talking about painting as cooking, as he critiqued your paintings. For example, when you were painting Russian motifs, he'd suggest that you were maybe into Russian cooking that day.
Right.
Remembering that later, in 1978, in your first book, Feedback, you wrote, "In my New Haven kitchen, I discovered that cooking was painting, that adding some herbs and parsley was like adding color from my palette, your painting palette, and that chopping the nuts coarsely was like adding certain rough textures to my painting medium, and that planning a harmonious meal, one that looked and tasted delicious, with just the right number of contrasts and counterpoints, was like composing a canvas. I was home at last. The kitchen was a studio, and the studio was a kitchen." And
That's
I
true.
wonder how much art has influenced your interest in food and your cooking. And you've come from art to food, and then you went on to food as art.
Well, the thing is, you know what the flavors are. And if you've got good ingredients, you try to put them together harmoniously. And, you know, people appreciated being invited over because there weren't a lot of places to eat out. And so if you invited them for dinner, they said, yes, indeed.
But talk a little bit about that. I was particularly when Pam brought that up, I was curious about that whole thing about your art teacher coming over and looking at your painting and deciding what you were clearly into food wise at the time. Can you elaborate on that a little
Well,
bit?
Joseph Albers would walk into your studio and he'd say, I see we are into a little Italian cooking today, just by the colors and shapes. And I hadn't really thought of it that way, but it was cute that he said that. And you know, I just didn't associate it with making food at home and making art in the studio, but they are related, of course.
Mhm. You had mentioned to me that perhaps, and we're going to go into this a bit more, but that travel, perhaps more than art, was really where you kind of hit your influences. Is
Well,
that true? I mean,
eating
we.
out
Mhm,
in different countries,
mhm.
having food that you certainly didn't have in Brooklyn. Um, I expanded my interest. I bought cookbooks to read up about it because I wanted to be able to reproduce the flavors. I remember being in Spain one August, it was hot as hell, and I had gazpacho every day to see which one was the one I liked the best, so I could remember the taste when I would make it at home.
And you mentioned too that back then when you were traveling and everything that if you had no, again, this is part of Joyce, if you know Joyce, not having any sense of embarrassment about going and simply asking him, how did you make that? What did you do?
I always wanted to ask. They didn't always invite you into the kitchen, but I wanted to know how the dish was made. And then I would buy a cookbook from that country and look it up.
Mhm,
And so imprint it in my head.
mhm.
Well,
And go ahead, Pam.
it helps that she spoke what, Italian, French,
I spoke Italian and French.
Spanish also a little bit, or?
I can understand it because it's close to Italian, but I still love speaking Italian. I could speak it all the time.
No. Yeah, moving on. I just wanted to know, yeah, those early travels of yours, you lived in Italy, you went to Rome with your former husband,
Yeah.
traveled throughout the Mediterranean. I mean, were there any Mediterranean countries you didn't include in your books? You covered.
I don't know whether we got to Portugal the first time. We did get to Spain. We did get to France, Italy, and I think we got to Morocco. And I was interested in all this food, so then I would buy cookbooks to read up on it and understand how the dish came together.
Good. We got a question from Sheila Cry about she wants to know whether or not your dinner guests back in college reciprocated. Did they ever have you to
They
dinner?
didn't all have a kitchen. See, I was one of the students that was married and had an apartment, and so I could entertain. Very few could reciprocate because they were living in places where they didn't have a kitchen.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah.
Uh, Going back to when you were living in Italy, and being in Rome, talk about the just the sheer power of the market experience and what
Well,
that was like
sure.
for you.
Growing up in Brooklyn, you'd go into a store and there'd be 6 apples and something, not very much. And when you get to Rome and they have a whole block of covered markets inside, and I could go around and talk to the guys and ask them, what do you do with that? What do you do with that? And they'd tell me how they prepared it. And then I had books, so then I would look it up and say, oh, that's a good idea. I'll try it that way. And that's how I learned. Self-taught from books.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah.
Well, you said then about coming to the Bay Area, and that was because your husband worked here at that time.
Yeah, he had a job
You
to
moved.
Donaldson, an architect, and then he ended up at Skidmore and Merrill. And so we ended up here while he worked, and I was painting and having kids and cooking.
And it says that by having those children and raising them and not having time to paint, you then pivoted to food. And we just want to know how your home cooking led to teaching.
Well, we'd invite friends over for dinner, and then someone would say, next time you make that, could I come over and hang out so I could learn? And some days I had 4 people in the kitchen watching, and it never struck me as being odd that they wanted to know, and I was happy to share the information and the taste.
And that led to the California Cooking School, right? California Street.
Around the, yeah, I mean, it didn't happen immediately, but
Mhm.
more and more people ask how to do something, and so I opened the school.
And also, you said that painting, what you had to really devote time to painting, whereas for cooking and teaching cooking, you could you could manage that around raising the kids and
Oh,
doing.
yeah, absolutely. When you're a painter, you don't need a lot of interruptions. You need privacy and quiet. And when you're a mom with 3 kids, uh, you're not going to have that. So you learn to do what you can. And cooking was a very good creative outlet. So I'm glad I did it.
Mhm. And later, it led to teaching design, kitchen design, even at UC Berkeley, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Could we pivot back to the cooking school? I think that's probably a piece for a lot of people out there in the audience that they may not know that much about. Joyce, in Northern California, and a gentleman named Jack Lirio down in LA opened the first two cooking schools really in California. In 1965, I believe,
Right.
is when you opened up the California Street
I
Cooking
think so.
School. And what was amazing about it at the time was just how ambitious it was for those people who are in the Bay Area and you've ever driven down California Street and you've driven by that time-honored Chinese restaurant that has never changed the menu, Eliza's, that has been there forever. That was the cooking school space. And what was incredible about its longevity was also just the sheer ambitiousness of it. I mean, talk about like you were cooking and other people were cooking.
Yeah, I taught Mediterranean food. And Ruben Medina, who owned a Mexican restaurant, taught Mexican cooking. Pat Martin taught baking because that was her passion. And we had people sign up for all sorts of classes. And it was very gratifying because you could see the diversity of interests in people and wanting to know how to do it.
Yeah. It was also just impressive because if you were to go back and look at the attendees who came to her classes, it was very much a who's who of San Francisco back then. I remember Chuck and Helen Schwab coming to
Yeah,
classes and
yeah.
things like that. But I also think one of the other classes that really helped develop your palate over time was, again, back at the time and thinking about we are, a long 60 years ago, you taught a class called Cooking Without Recipes.
Yeah, we'd get a bunch of ingredients and we talk about options of what we could do with them. And then we would make it. Most of the time it was good. Occasionally it'd have a bomb, or it didn't work, but it was really fun. And people could talk about the ingredients and what they'd like to see. And then we do it. It
Very
was fun.
powerful at the time to
It
do that.
was, yeah.
Yeah.
And then how did you get this kitchen design class
Oh,
at UC
we're
Berkeley?
living in Berkeley, and one of the people that took one of my cooking classes was an instructor in the architecture department. And he asked me if I could talk about kitchen design. So I said, okay, I will. And that's how it started. There was this cliche of the triangle, the refrigerator, the sink, and the stove. But the refrigerator could be in another room. It didn't really matter. It was the ratio of stove to sink because you were working with both of them. And it was really fun. It was fun teaching.
And did all your teaching, whether at the California Street Cooking School or at UC Berkeley, did that have any effect later on helping you to learn how to run a restaurant or how to?
Oh, the thing is, when I was teaching cooking, Evan was working as a busboy at Chez Panisse, and Alice asked me to come in and cook. So I ran the cafe. I didn't even realize I was running a restaurant. I was just cooking a lot of food. And it never dawned on me that it would be weird or scary to open a restaurant. So I did. I had people who said, if you ever want to open a restaurant, I'll invest. And they did. They weren't just bulling around. And it was fun. I loved it.
And who came up with the great name, Square One? I love it.
Well, you know, the expression every day starts at square one. I think it's based on crossword puzzles or something. But to me, every day I'd look at what ingredients we had, and then I would put together a menu.
Mhm.
That was starting at square one.
And then going back to square one, I mean, that's just beautiful marketing right there. Go back to square one.
Well, I hadn't thought about it, but we start at square one, so that's where we started.
Yeah, it was very interesting too for those people that remember Square One, and it's very amazing location on Sydney Walton Square down by, everyone calls that place MacArthur Park, but it's actually Sydney Walton
Well,
Square.
because MacArthur
The
Park
park was across the
used to be
street, right? But that was actually not the first location, right? The original location, we looked at two other places before that. You looked first at a little spot on Bush Street called Fanny's Market, which was
Yeah.
beautiful, but not a
Not
great space.
practical. And also I started on California in Divisadero, where I had my cooking
Yeah.
school, and that could have been a restaurant
Yeah.
because it certainly was big enough. You just wanted to be where there were people that wanted to eat.
But it was also important to you because the second spot you looked at for Square One was the space that eventually was Bill Kimpton's second property. Bill showed you the property
Yeah, but it
himself,
wasn't the right kind
but
of kitchen to
but it
be.
was the space that Moss's came in, and you were very adamant about wanting an open kitchen,
Kitchen.
which is something you were very comfortable with from Chez
Yeah,
Panisse at the
yeah.
cafe. Yeah.
And that way you could talk to customers and they could come up and watch what you were doing.
Mhm.
So I like the idea.
And you were really a pioneer in the open kitchen concept. I mean, it was fun to watch you and to see what was going on and kind of look in and see, well, maybe I could do that.
Well, and not only that, people would come up and talk to the cooks and watch them. And I thought that was really lovely. We even had a window in the kitchen where you could watch the pastry department working. People would stand at the window and peer in for quite a while. It was our back door, and they could come in for a little while and see what was going on. It was very nice.
It was. Well, you raised a family, you taught cooking, you started and ran Square One, which was a James Beard Award-winning restaurant. You ran it for 12 years. You did restaurant consulting. You prolifically, including 28 books, many of them award winners, from IACP, from James Beard, lots of awards. And as well, you wrote wonderful weekly newspaper articles for the Chronicle.
For the Chronicle, right.
Loved them.
Well,
And
that was good because you could get feedback from the readers. They would ask for columns about certain things and you say, oh, okay, that's a good idea. I'll do that.
well, I want to know, how did you ever manage to do all that you did?
I am a workaholic. I confess, I like to work. I hate being bored. The more you pile on me, the happier I am.
And you're
I
curious.
like
You're curious, I think.
to work.
Fabulous.
Very much so.
And your family, your children, your daughter-in-law, your grandchildren influenced you and helped you in your culinary pursuits over the years. How did that come about?
Well, they were the diners, so they could give you feedback and say, this was good, or next time, why don't we try this way? They were avid eaters and easy.
Yeah, I think she's being humble here in many respects. I mean, everybody has been touched at some level or another through her. I mean, obviously, I won't talk about my own things, but obviously, I was very influenced by Joyce's stuff, and my love for wine and love for wine and food come from there. But everybody else too. My sister Karen was worked for a while at Square One. She was in the pastry department to the day. She still bakes and is a very good baker. My other sister Rachel, who's an artist, designed a lot of the drawings in the Mediterranean kitchen. All of those, which you can see there, are all
Those are Rachel.
exactly. Those are all Rachel. And closer to home as well too. Grandchildren have engaged too. Elena, as you mentioned earlier, has worked did a lot of the transcription for the
Interviews,
the
yeah.
interviews for the Inside the
Yeah,
California
yeah.
California Wine Revolution, and is a very good cook herself, and very avid gourmet. And then Adam, our son, he's a serious cook. He's probably
Yeah.
the most there. And then Barbara, my wife, Joyce's daughter-in-law, is a jammer of
Yeah,
proportions
we put
extra.
up a lot of preserves.
Yeah.
Yep.
And that book's dedicated to her, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
It is. So it is a family affair, to quote Sly and the Family Stone, and another great San Franciscan.
Well, your magnum opus, I mean, there are several magnum what is it? Opus. Anyway, starting with, this was the first one with over
It's
400.
right in kitchen. Yep. And people still use that book. I still use that book.
It's wonderful. It's a fabulous book. And then the other one was the
Back to Square One, I did.
yes,
And
Kitchen Conversations.
Kitchen
That was a
Conversations.
trio at Square One that you wrote.
Yeah. You know, I enjoyed testing recipes. Didn't want to have a recipe that didn't work. When I was working at Chez Panisse and their first menu book came out, I'd pick up the phone and people would be crying because their almond tart was running over the oven. And I'd have to talk them through it. And I thought, when I write a book, I don't want anyone call me crying. Gotta make sure these are fine.
Yeah, I think one of the elements of Joyce's books, and you mentioned Pam, that she's written, well over 20, close to 30. That she first of all, two things. Number one, the first book she ever wrote, you actually quoted early on, which was Feedback, which is, if you can find it in the used books market, this was back in the 70s, and Feedback, Cooking is Communication. It was a very wonderful piece of the era, and many of the recipes are still very germane today. I still use a lot of them myself. And then, yes, look at that. Look at you back then, right? And then, she delved through all these other books. There's the whole trilogy of Jewish books that you wrote, that are amazing and awesome. And then, of course, this one was the only book inside the California Food Revolution that was it was a textbook. It was the only book you did without recipes.
To let people know how things developed here.
How did you decide to do that? Or what happened? Why did you write that book?
I think UC Berkeley asked me to do that book. They were really interested in what was going on and they wanted someone to put it into words. So I said, I'll give it a shot. And I did.
Yeah, yeah.
well, this is a culinary history treasure. I mean, with everyone who brought something to the California food revolution
Right.
interviewed, it's fabulous. And
Thank you.
I have recommended it to so many people. It's still current. All the ideas are still current. And
Yeah.
I just wonder, it was a very exciting time for all of us. But in light of it, I wonder, is the revolution continuing? Has it stalled? What do you think?
Well, I don't think it's stalled. I mean, farmers keep growing new items, cooks keep buying the food and playing with it. It's not as revolutionary as it was in the 60s, where people were cooking basic French food, It's just, we have a greater variety.
Okay, we were just talking about the fact that Joyce, you've donated your library, 2,100 books, thousands of menus, personal archival materials to UC Davis, and they're being cataloged. And they have digitized, thanks to your granddaughter's transcription, 181 interviews that you did for the California Food Revolution. And these are just amazing resources for culinary historians now and in the future. And we owe you an enormous bunch of gratitude for doing that. Do you want to talk about why you did this and
Well, they have an active cooking program. I gave them all the 12 years of menus that we had. And
Plus more, you had the Chez Panisse Cafe
yeah,
menus
I have
also.
the cafe menus too. But it's, I believe in education, and the more that people see, the more they want to learn and get turned on. And it's different for everybody how people learn. So I learn by reading and doing. I don't learn from listening. It goes in, it goes out. But if I read it, I keep it forever. And if I do it, I keep it forever. So
And now those things are there forever for everyone. That's
uh,
fabulous. Just
Yeah, it was really critical to Joyce that whoever was going to be the recipient of this extraordinary trove and treasure that is her career, that they would keep it together. And we talked to a number of people, and a lot of them wanted to cherry pick you. Well, we already have these books, and we don't really need this. And it really was a collection, and we felt strongly about that. I know you did.
yeah. And Davis said they would keep the whole thing together, and they have an active program. So I felt it would be in good hands.
Mhm.
and it's at the UC Davis Digital Library.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to take them a while to catalog and get everything up there. It was many days and two full van loads and a lot of stuff. So it's going to take them some time, but when it's all up there, not only is it going to be great for Joyce, but to your point, so many other chefs that she worked with covered the history, a lot of the history of San Francisco and dining goes back again, the cooking school and the eras before that. And she was a incredible chronicler of a lot of materials there that UC Davis was very excited to get.
Absolutely. Well, I think it's time to celebrate. And we want to thank you, Joyce. We
Happy to be
we
here.
want to just congratulate you on your landmark. And
Thank you.
and we also want to recognize that our friend from Baker's Dozen,
She
Marilyn
baked beautiful
Tabatsky,
cake. Isn't that
baked,
beautiful?
baked a beautiful birthday cake for you.
It is. It
We hope
is.
you'll enjoy.
We
And
will enjoy it.
she's on the board of Baker's Dozen,
Ah,
and Marilyn took pleasure in providing that for you, and we thank her
I'm
for
going
it.
to cut her a slice while you're talking
Oh,
with Joyce, Sarah.
absolutely. Absolutely. And we want to thank you for doing this. While he's cutting that, do you have
I
oh,
have a fork. I
tell
have
him.
a cake.
Yeah,
And have a bite.
good.
Good.
Somebody said it was going to be a mocha cake, is it?
It's got mocha filling, chocolate cake, and almond paste top.
Are you happy?
I'm happy.
Good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, and I'll hand this over to, thank you too, Evan. This was fabulous to have you both.
That was my pleasure to be
Thank
here.
you.
My pleasure. And Andrew, you want to
So,
close?
yes, thank you so much, Joyce, Evan, Pam, for that lively conversation. And I also want to thank BACH co-founder Carrie Tilley for all of her work on this event. And as is always already, thanking again Marilyn Tabatsky of Baker's Dozen, because that looks like a beautiful cake.
Yes, Baker's Dozen.
I wish I could be there. Let me give a
Well, we
huge
can
thank
say
you
we were
to our
pleased.
audience for being here and to everyone that submitted questions beforehand and in the chat. We hope that you'll join us again for future online presentations and in-person events. We have some exciting programming coming up for the rest of the year and are working on some great surprises for 2026.